today we are here to talk about Web3. I am Tony Sherba. I'm the CEO and founder of Yeti. I'm here with Will.
My name is Will. I'm a software developer here at Yeti.
Cool. And so recently, Will and I have been diving into the world of Web3. And if you've been paying attention to Twitter or anything like that, you've probably seen Web3 all over the place. I gave a lunch and learn a few months ago now on some of the updates with Ethereum. And so this is sort of a follow-up to that. Since then, there's been a heck of a lot of buzz and new terminology and things like that thrown out. So we're going to try to keep this pretty short and sweet and just kind of hit on some of the basics. There's a heck of a lot going on in this space to keep up with. So first, we're going to talk through some of the tech foundation. So it's like, hey, what's going on? What's going on here? And to start with that, I wanted to show this this infographic that walks through kind of the evolution and history of the web. So the first version of it was like you create a web page and you get something back. It was very read, like that's all you could do. The next version was that you could put things on it. You can make a Facebook post, you can make a Twitter post, you can put something on YouTube, and then people could consume it. What is happening now and what Web3 is read, write, execute, or like Will and I were talking about this before, read, write, own. There's an ownership model and a way of executing actually on the internet rather than on servers and things like that. And we'll get into maybe a little bit more about the main premise is that you really kind of own and can execute your own, I don't know, Will, I'm lapsed for a word here, but
your own content, your own processing, your own, anything that you would do over the internet sort of now is extracted from a central like repository or a centralized authority and is now sort of distributed through the market instead, or through the chain, I guess. Yeah. Thank you.
So the main, like where all the action is at for this is it's kind of started with the Ethereum network, and now there's like these layer twos. And so Ethereum is generally considered layer one, and then there's layer twos on top of it. But for just to describe this, it's a decentralized computing platform. You don't have a central database like you would in Web 2, where it's all stored in the server room and everything's like, and everything is run, right there. It's that lots of you create code, and then lots of people all over the world have that code, and it can be executed and validated, by anybody that's on the network. You pay a transaction and gas fees every time. So you essentially or somebody is paying per transaction rather than having it all centralized in a big company paying for that. We'll mention this a couple times, but once your code is released and it's on the network, it's there forever. Like transactions happen, and they're there, and it's public. Everybody can see. Things are mostly user driven or predominantly user driven. You have your own wallet, which is your identity on the network, and you trigger transactions to run and authenticate things through your wallet. As I mentioned, everything is transparent, but anonymous. Your wallet address is 0x and then the whole string of characters after it. You can assign, domain names and things like that to your wallet, but for the most part, it's just your wallet address is who you are. Another thing we'll get into is like there's no customer support. This is like you really own it. Like it's yours, and it's not on a centralized database. And so it's really important for you to be doing due diligence on the things that you're interacting with, and making sure that you don't lose your keys, your private keys, and access to all your information. There this has pluses and minuses. Like there is, there's a ton of opportunity for you to own your own stuff. But you don't have that fallback of a company who owns it all for you, helping you out. The major thing and like what people are talking about is Web3 is the token economy. It's like everything is represented by tokens, and there's different types of tokens. There are fungible tokens, which are essentially kind of like the currencies and things like that. There's a heck of a lot more different applications than just currency for tokening. But those are fungible tokens. They're all the same. And then there's non-fungible tokens, which is everybody's heard about NFTs, but they represent unique specific items or assets. And so there's a whole combination of like how these different things work between tokens and between fungible and non-fungible tokens that are kind of creating these very interesting dynamics. So jumping in a little bit to how it works from like a user perspective. So most people have probably heard of like Coinbase or BlockFi, Gemini, Crypto.com, and have heard of people investing in cryptocurrencies. You can go onto one of these like centralized exchanges. They are sanctioned by the SEC. They have, tokens that you can buy on them, but it's still actually a centralized banking system. You don't actually own your wallet. Your wallet is on a server somewhere, and it's actually like owned by that company. That's how most people understand crypto right now is like, hey, I go on to Coinbase and I buy Ethereum and then I see it go up. Yay. That's not necessarily like Web3 kind of like is the next level of that. So to kind of get into Web3, there's browser extensions that are wallets. And so some of the most popular are MetaMask and Wallet Connect. There's a 100 other ones as well, but these are certainly like kind of far and away like the most popular. So you get a MetaMask browser extension, then you get that is your wallet. Again, you have to store your private keys. It's like it's really important. People have hardware wallets and things like that because they're concerned about getting their computers hacked. You want to have it's very important to keep those private keys because you don't have a company that's backing you up that has a backup of that. But so you install this browser extension and you have your wallet, and then you can transfer crypto from the centralized exchange into it. You can interact with other people. I can send you a transaction. I can send Will a transaction. Will can send me a transaction. I can go and then interact with a Web3 application and connect my wallet and invest in something, lend to somebody, play a game, buy an NFT, mint an NFT. Like there's a lot of different things that you can go do once you kind of have that wallet extension in your browser, and you can actually interface with some of these applications.
One other interesting thing on that note is the idea of identity with the wallet. Like it really is like your public facing. Tony already made this point, but it's like your public facing face, for lack of a better word. And wallets, at least my understanding is that they don't necessarily carry from chain to chain. So you'll have like a separate wallet, for example, Solana versus Ethereum, depending on the exact technology that you're using. But like there are different systems in place and different identities that you would adopt depending on which chain you wanted to interact with.
Yeah, and that's a good point actually on like the other chains as well. And so every time you actually do a transaction, or you approve something even or anything like that, you have to pay, because this is all like on a network. And you have to pay somebody to execute the code to do that, and so there's gas fees involved in it. Ethereum is by far like the biggest network out there doing this stuff, and so what has happened is people have, and so it gets expensive. I mean, it can be $100+ to actually like do a transaction right now because the price of Ethereum has gone up. You're paying Ethereum every time. There's now these layer twos. where people have created side chains like Polygon and Avalanche and things like that have these layer 2, like they're on layer 2, and it's like much less congested, and it's much cheaper to do transactions on it. So depending on the you have to kind of just look and see what these different gas fees are to interact with them. And there's, to Will's point, there's these different chains, and you can bridge tokens between different chains and things like that as well. So walking through a visual example of just like sort of getting involved in the Web3 space is, let's say this on the left side here is Coinbase. So, I've got some money in Ethereum in Coinbase, and I want to interact with some Web3 applications, and I want to use my Ethereum. I would then say, okay, I want to send $200, and I would put in my MetaMask wallet address here, and I'd hit continue, and it would send the transaction to the network. The network would then say, oh, okay, we're now moving this much money from this Coinbase wallet to this MetaMask wallet. It would then pop up in a browser right here where it's okay, cool, there's 200, you have this much Ethereum now in your wallet. Then I could go to this right here is Sushi Swap. It's a decentralized exchange, so I could trade my Ethereum for DAI, which is it's a stable coin, and I could basically kind of like put in how much Ethereum I want to swap for that, and then I could hit swap. Gas fees are super expensive right now, so it would be $100 for me to do that, and so I don't have enough money to do this transaction right now, and so I'd have to hit reject. But if gas fees were lower and I really wanted to do this, I could hit confirm. This gets confirmed, sent to the blockchain, and then I now have swapped my money. This is just one simple example of like something you can do. You can exchange money very easily on chain. And these are tokens, right? Like a DAI is a token that represents a US dollar. So kind of jumping back into some of the logistics around actually since we're a web development company, some of the logistics around actually creating creating Web3 applications. So the first step is like you want to sign in, and to do that, you connect your wallet. A pop-up would come up and it would say, hey, do you want to connect your wallet? You would say like, yes, I allow them to see my address. And it's like signing up for a Web2 app. You're now in, and you don't have to put an email. You don't have to put a password. You don't have to put any of that stuff. It's you connecting your wallet. And it's anonymous. Like you're just there doing your thing.
Another really cool thing there is that you don't have to rely on any sort of like identifying tokens in your browser as far as like cookies or session tokens or things along those lines. Like the next time you visit that site, if you're logged into your wallet, the site's like, oh, I recognize this number. Like this person is this person, and they are authorized to use this website. So it kind of like reduces the barrier for like continually using an application. And it's also like a completely anonymous way to be like, yeah, I've been here before. You may not know who I am, but you've given me permission to be here before. So it's pretty cool stuff.
For sure. And on the ownership thing that we've been talking about too, is if you don't want that site to have access to your stuff anymore, you just don't show them your wallet. and that's that, so it's there's just a lot of, you have a heck of a lot more control as the user in this situation. And what that means in terms of actually building stuff is, you have front end code. There's ether.js, which can access the wallet, see what's in it, and stuff like that. There's the users, your Web3 apps would then generally, have a way for somebody to interact with a smart contract. The smart contract is on the Ethereum in this example, is on the Ethereum mainnet or any other mainnet. And your web app is just an interface to it. They can actually go and access that smart contract otherwise, but your web app is just like an easy user interface to do it. And most users aren't going to be command lining stuff. So most web apps are, in some form changing, having users interact, create, transfer, mint tokens. And so what that can mean though, is like, in the case of an NFT, it's like transferring a piece of an image, or buying an image, or it's buying tokens and or lending tokens and stuff like that. So it's very much like affiliated with finance and moving things about. Most things are synchronous. So actually almost everything is synchronous on in Web3. Because when you go to make a transaction, it needs to, you then submit that to the chain, and then it has to be like processed onto the chain. And so there is kind of a lot of waiting that you have to do. And even the web application needs to ask a user's permission to do something. And so the applications themselves end up having these design elements that have a lot of waiting for user interaction or waiting for the chain to go through. Will, do you have anything?
Yeah, there's some cool technologies that are sort of working on that problem. I think there's one called Arcweave or something like that, where they're trying to build like an indexing layer in between the chain and the application, so that like you can kind of accumulate all of the information from the chain that your application would be interested in ahead of time, so that the actual Web3 app experience feels a lot snappier and a lot faster, closer to what like a native web application would look like, which is cool for sure. There's going to be a lot more stuff like that, I think, that's going to be bridging kind of like that pain point of the waiting period for the chain.
And we are still in the there's a lot of hype around Web3, but we are still in the very early days of this. And the technologies are still like very much developing. I don't think Solidity, which is the main programming language for smart contracts, hasn't even put the like 1.0 on their on their version numbers yet. So we're getting there. So in terms of developing applications, there's some like important questions that you need to answer, or you need to ask before you kind of start getting involved in developing these things. The first is kind of obvious, like, how are we going to test this? Like, and so there's a ton of these like test nets out there that you can get you can basically get fake money to run. And the Ethereum Foundation, which is like the nonprofit that actually like promotes this, runs this network and allows developers to work on it. And all the Ethereum you have in there is fake Ethereum, basically. And so you want to really, like, when you're building this stuff, work in the test net for as long as possible and make sure that everything is really solid. Be concerned about the surface security issues and things like that. There are now like auditing organizations out there who will audit smart contracts to make sure that they don't, that nobody's going to, be able to do anything nefarious on it, or steal all your tokens or something like that. Because everything's permanent. Once you submit it to the chain, it's on the chain forever. So.
Yeah, permanent and immutable, which I think is an important point. Like, you can't like say I put smart contract A on the Ethereum network, like I can't change that. Like that is baked into the chain itself. And so if I wanted to say I messed up, I had an off by one error or something, and I needed to fix that, I would have to redeploy an entirely new contract to fix that problem, which would be like sort of a separate thing entirely.
Right. And your web app can point to different contracts, but that contract is still there. And so if it has access to, like, let's say access to a wallet or something like that, it's an issue. Another thing, and we've actually been kind of exploring this with some clients recently, is, especially in the NFT space, is like, how on chain is this, and how decentralized is this actually going to be? We work in a very centralized world right now, with most things being on AWS and things like that. And so, how much of this can get moved to how much of things can get moved to the chain is is still a very, very much an open question. And how much is it efficient to move it, and is it cost effective to move it, are still like big questions. Will, you want to?
Yeah, I'll hop in here. So there are like a few, we've been talking a little bit about this internally, like Tony said, using the use case of trying to mint an NFT for an image as an example. Like, say we wanted to mint an NFT that represented like Yeti's logo, for example. There are kind of three main options that I'm aware of at this point. I'm sure there are more, but one option is to literally in the NFT's code, like in the smart contracts code itself, you would encode like base64 encode or something like that, the actual data of the image, so that lives like literally on the chain, so that there's no external hosting service. It's just like baked into the blockchain itself. This is the most expensive option, because as you add bytes to the transaction, as the transaction size gets larger, you end up paying more and more gas. So if you're trying to do, say, like a 4K image or something like that, the cost of actually putting that into the chain itself would be cost prohibitive, to put it lightly. Another option is something called IPFS, which is an acronym for the Interplanetary File System. This is a distributed network for file storage that's I'm not super knowledgeable about, still early days from my understanding, but as far as I understand it, it's almost like some people on this call will remember Napster, like a peer-to-peer like file sharing service. This is like Napster, but on the chain, sort of. So you would host an image into the IPFS system, and everybody who's participating in that system sort of agrees to like pick up that copy of the image as it's requested, and then hold it almost in a cache so that it can be accessed throughout the network much more quickly. And because it's been sort of broken apart into the IPFS system, the actual cost of the transaction is much lower, because all you're really storing on the NFT itself is a link to where that thing is stored in IPFS. So you're not actually taking that 4K image and encoding it into the chain. You're just putting like a link to another decentralized storage system into the chain itself. The third option, which is like kind of anti decentralization, is to literally just encode like a link to an external image hosting service like Imgur, or I don't know, Google Photos or something along those lines. You could encode a URI to a service like that, but at that point, like what the chain of ownership is for that image is a little bit hazy, and it's not really a decentralized storage solution, because Google decides to take the image down, and then like how do you actually prove custodianship of that image? So there are different ways that you can approach actually like putting something into the chain with varying levels of cost, I guess, is kind of the ultimate point on that point.
For sure. And on this is everything that you have in your smart contract is public. So people know. They can look at the code and they can be like, oh, this just points to Imgur. I don't know if I'm saying that right. But so when you hear about like some of these NFTs being very valuable, generally it's because they have a lot of logic, and the image is actually on chain. And so that's where like, people who are really into decentralization and all of this stuff are much more attracted to that and willing to spend money on it. Jumping into, we mentioned layer 2 networks before, but when actually building an application, it's important to think about which network you're going to be on. Ethereum is the most popular and the most accessible, really, because most things, most wallets interact with it, and most other apps work with it. But it is a very it's a very large network that gets bogged down, and you saw earlier like what gas fees can look like on it. There's other like side chains or layer 2s that are that are much cheaper and can process transactions, much faster. And it might make sense for an application to be on one of those versus another or versus Ethereum. And there's a heck of a lot of different side chains. Two mentioned here are Polygon and Avalanche. But you want to think through some of like, hey, versus, where do we want to live really? And like, where do we want to host our application? There are, and some of the use cases for this is like, Will and I were actually talking earlier today about a game, and so it's a game and people need to make a lot of transactions on it, like, pretty quickly. And like, they're building things and stuff like that. And it doesn't really make sense to be paying $100 per transaction on that. It would just be non-viable at that point. And so that game we were looking at, and I was like, we were talking about it, hey, it must be on like a layer 2, right? And we looked it up and like, yep, it's on a layer 2 because that's the only way it really makes sense,
For sure. And this whole like game space is super interesting as well, because like there's most people who play video games are familiar with the pattern of pay to play, where you pay a corporation to pay their game. World of Warcraft is like a really good example, right? $15 a month for the rest of your life, unless you actually cancel the subscription. The alternative in the sort of like Web3 space is actually like play to earn. So there's this game called Axie Infinity, and there are a few others that I've heard where once you get into the system and you start actually playing the game, you are able to extract value out of the system that you've put into it. So you can actually earn Ethereum while you're playing this game. And for certain people who are living in, lower cost of living areas, third world countries, they've actually been able to like support their families playing this game and like earning Ethereum, which is a wild idea for sure. Kind of like flips that whole paradigm in reverse,
Yeah, we're living. Things are moving quickly. There's a lot of things happening. And so then on that too, it's like who pays for gas and when, and how are these transactions actually processed? Smart contracts have wallets themselves. They can pay for gas. There are lots of different, there's kind of a lot of different paradigms that you can create with all these different tokens, and when you do transactions and things like that. In the case of this game that Will was just talking about, it's a they've figured out it's called tokenomics. They've figured out like a tokenomics system where they can actually pay their users back for it. And so there's a lot of just like kind of figuring out this stuff that happens inside of Web3 apps. And it's honestly this like very interesting, like, there's game theory and philosophy and a heck of a lot of things, and economics, like kind of all stacked on top of each other when thinking about these things. And obviously the more complex it gets, the more sophisticated some of that stuff needs to get outside of just development too.
But the ideas are cool. I can imagine a world where, a very successful tweet of mine will actually like put some more value into my pocket rather than just kind of like continuing to create ad revenue for Twitter, for example.
Right. Well, and that's a big point that people make about Web3 too, or Web3 as well, is that it gives creators a lot more control. Like there's a right now, like, you make a Facebook post and Facebook makes money, Twitter makes money, and there's with NFTs and like a lot of stuff, like there's this whole idea that the creator economy can really kind of like, take off, which is another buzzword too. So we're talking about this, a few use cases that people are doing. So, okay, cool. I can connect my wallet. I can move money around, like stuff like that. So like what does that actually mean? So some of the big areas are DeFi, decentralized finance, and NFTs, like the creator economy we were just talking about. The whole, and you can do a ton of research. There's like a podcast called Bankless and like a whole bunch of stuff going on with this, but like what a lot of people are saying, and they're offering financial services now, are people can really become their own bank. You put money in a bank to make sure it's safe, and hopefully get interest on it, and then maybe they give you a loan at some point. If you have your money in the blockchain, it's safe. Like nobody can get it unless you lose your private keys. And you can, and now what they're doing is they're coming up with like, there's a ton of different like decentralized finance applications, DeFi applications, where you can contribute to a liquidity pool, or you can provide a loan for somebody, or you can do kind of like a lot of these different things, and you can earn interest, oftentimes much more than you can at a bank on your money. And so there's a lot of different things that are going on there. There's a very interesting project that I was looking at recently, that actually is like sucking carbon, in the sense of like, it's people, they have tokenized carbon credits, and they're building a massive treasury of carbon, and they're using that as a financial tool to say, hey, like we think the price of carbon is going to be going up, and so we're going to accumulate as much carbon, and then we're never going to spend it, and it's going to be, and we're going to have a big treasury that's this much. So it's just, there's very interesting things and interesting dynamics that are happening. And one thing is, it's global and 24/7. So if you right now, it's like everything is on New York time, and you can only trade between this time and this time unless you pay extra money, and then you can get after hours trading. And only people that are in the United States can do it, and like whatever. This is open 24/7. Anybody can access it. You can interact with anybody. You don't even necessarily, with smart contracts, you don't even necessarily need to meet them. You can enter into a contract that has like parameters, and the code is law there. And it's like, if I give somebody a loan and it's collateralized and they don't pay it back, then the contract liquidates them and I get my money, So it's like, there's just these very interesting dynamics that, really there's just not like a big overhead of a banking system that is, predicated on, putting gold bars in the back of a, wagon and sending it, across the country and having, robbers come get it. And like, it's like we've evolved quite a bit, since then, and, moving it into, big offices where people are approving transactions and things. Anyway, I could go on for probably a long time about that. There's NFTs. We've kind of talked about this a lot, but like art, art, gaming, all of this stuff like can be put on here. There's a whole creator economy. Property, it can be registered as it. Like I actually bought like a domain name on Ethereum, and that's mine now. And so it's, that's unique. It's unique to me. And so it's non-fungible. And then there's this really interesting thing where there's like fractionalized ownership too. And, you can own a piece of an asset, and like a whole like group of people can. Will, you got anything?
Yeah, I got two things there. One, on like the banking like infrastructure idea, like if this idea takes off and like cryptocurrency or blockchain is able to actually become like our financial system, which, who knows if that's going to happen. If it does, it's maybe a long way off. But in my mind, it's kind of impressive just the sheer number of man hours that we would be able to save, right? We wouldn't have to be paying hundreds of thousands of people to work in different banking institutions, like Tony was saying, across the country, approving transactions and writing loans and doing all of these things, when like we could bake all of that into the logic of the chain itself. Like it's a really cool idea. Another thing that I think is really cool about the NFT creator economy idea is that you can logically bake into an item royalties for the creator. So if I am an artist who creates like a series of 50 images, I can write into that contract that every time that image gets sold, I get 0.5% of the transaction fee. Meaning like if that continues to go up, like I have passive income off the work that I created and sold to an individual with no intermediary at all. And like that access to creators and that access to consumers without an intermediary feels kind of impossible now, unless you actually have like a personal relationship with a person, right? So it's really cool ideas in the space for sure.
And as more and more things come on chain as well, there's like, right now it's like all just JPEGs and people are like, oh, you're buying JPEGs, whatever. But I mean, like, there's a lot, like, you can think of, a lot of different, writing and, video and, all kinds of different like creative endeavors that can actually be tokenized and brought on chain too. Another like very interesting thing, and I mentioned this in my last lunch and learn, is there's this whole token driven governance movement that's happening. And so it's, you have your identity tied to your wallet and you can have tokens in it. And there's a whole kind of system being like developed right now where people are exploring different ways in which people who have tokens can vote on like policy proposals and, kind of create these organizations that are, that they're both decentralized and autonomous, which is DAOs, is the common terminology there. But it's, so I think there's just like some very interesting things. I talked to a client about like a fan club model, like as an example that could be interesting, and you get tokens for how long you've been a fan of something. So, all that to say that there's an incredibly interesting like blend of, and I actually like took I was texting with a friend of mine and he was just like, there's this interesting blend of economics, philosophy, game theory, art, and technology all coming together at the same time. And I was like, I can't agree more. Like there's, it's certainly like very, very interesting, this space and like, and what's happening in it. And it's not really just technology. There's like a heck of a lot more that's just baked into it. It's kind of like, how we account for things and like, how we transact and things like that.
And what communities mean, right? Like we're like literally allowing people to create almost like ad hoc communities around whatever they want, as long as they have the technical skills to make it happen, which is cool.
Yeah. And we'll probably see over more time, like more and more over time, that they don't even need the technical skills because there'll be tools that help them too. So a little bit of just like some visual examples. This is, again, I Sushi Swap is a big platform in DeFi right now, and so it's like you can lend, like you can do loans, and like granted, like some of these, like do your own research on any of this stuff. I'm not saying go make a bunch of loans right now, but somebody who has a bunch of Bitcoin, right? Maybe it's like, but they might not, they have a bunch of Bitcoin. They don't necessarily want to sell their Bitcoin. They think Bitcoin's going to go up. But they want to get some DAI, like again, that's like a dollar token. They want to get some DAI, and they're willing to put up some of their Bitcoin as collateral to get some DAI. You can actually lend out some DAI and they will pay a pretty sizable chunk of money for that. It actually has collateral. I mean, granted, Bitcoin can crash, but I mean, like, it's just, there's a lot, there's a whole dynamic, and there's like, this is just like a very simple example that I was able to take a screenshot of, but there's these lending pools and liquidity, like, like all kind, like there's people are really exploring this stuff, and it's just an explosion of, financial innovation, on these chains, which is cool. And so this is also, I mentioned this organization that's bonding carbon right now, and bringing it on chain and building this. And so you can buy a carbon token, which is verified, like from another source that says, hey, this actually represents a real carbon credit, like a carbon ton. And you can bring it in and you can put it in this, like, you can put it in this treasury, and then you can, gain interest on it and things like that. So, just some very, like, interesting out of the box type of things that, are being developed. And then this is a example of, some NFTs. It's like, this is, I mentioned Will and I took this, like, class, it's called Build Space. So credit to them. And as a part of completing that class, they sent you an NFT. And so this is like my crypto resume, that verifies that I actually, like, took that class. And, build space is saying, hey, here is your, like, it's a digital diploma, which is just an interesting. And then I bought an Ethereum domain name, basically. And so that's mine. Like, I own this. And then there's all sorts of, like, people are creating a lot of art that you can also, they have auctions that you can bid. And then, something like this, you would be able to, like, connect your wallet. And, if you had 28 Ethereum, which is like a ton of money, you'd be able to buy this. Or, well, I guess you'd have to have 29 to beat them. But, just a lot of different, different things for sure. Will, did you want to have anything?
No, that you pretty much covered it there, I think.
Right on. Cool. So we're kind of wrapping up stuff. But this is all moving, like, so fast. I gave a talk about, like, Ethereum and, like, the things that are happening in Ethereum a couple months ago. And, like, we have, over the course of those several months, almost 50% of our clients have at least, like, mentioned that they are like, hey, there might be something we can do. And we've had a bunch of companies come to us, hey, we're looking for some help building things in Web3. Like, we need to connect a wallet. We need to be able to, do, a lot of different things. I can't go into too many details, but there's a ton. I mean, this is where a lot of energy and a lot of action is happening right now. And I think there's different degrees in which we are gonna, like, we're gonna see ourselves involved. And there's a lot. Social media, I think, very specifically is going to be is going to change. And right before this, Facebook announced that they're going to change their name to Meta. And Mark Zuckerberg has made it very public that he is focusing on the metaverse. And I think he can actually see the writing on the wall that, hey, not everything is going to be as centralized as it has been in the past. People are going to have a lot more ownership of their identity, of the things they create, of the things they do. And it's not just going to be interacting with a platform the way it was. So he's actually trying to create his own platform right now. I don't think it's going to be owned by a single company. I mean, we'll see, the future will prove me right or wrong on that. I put a book here, which I would highly recommend anybody reading, called Snow Crash. It's actually, Neil Stephenson coined the term metaverse. And it was this, it was a place where people could, exchange items and do things digitally. And I mean, this book was written in the 90s, so it's very, like, forward thinking. But for corporations owned the planet in this book. So hopefully we don't end up in that sort of, like, situation. But there are some very interesting things that I think, somebody, thinking about the future wrote a long time ago that might actually we are starting to see those metamorphosize towards that. So I think, like, certainly what's happening already is decentralized finance is giving people access to financial opportunities, for better or worse. There are people, like, because this is, like, permissionless and open to anybody, there are a lot of bad actors in it. And everybody's heard of crypto scams and things like that. People are like some people from a consumer financial protection, like, perspective, like, people are way over leveraging themselves, and, doing really stupid things financially. But the fact that there's a little bit of, like, freedom associated with it as well. It's like, it's your money. It's like, it's a free country, and, like, you kind of should be able to do what you want, even if it's, stupid, but you shouldn't do anything stupid. Right. So it's like, for better or worse, there's going to be access to financial tools that most people have not really had access to. Most normal people would not really have had access to before. We talked about creators having more power over how they digitally distribute. More and more things are being tokenized. Like I mentioned, like carbon offset credits are being tokenized. Like, art is being tokenized. Like, I think, Will and I were talking about like, hey, maybe homes become like, tokenized, and, somebody works with a title company and figures that out. I think there's a lot there. We talked about DAOs, but there's like a whole like governance models and ways in which people are organized globally that are being experimented with, and really I think there's a ton of opportunity, and things that still need to be figured out there. Before I get to the main point, Will, I guess you have any other things on that?
Yeah, on the decentralized finance thing, one thing that I find really interesting and kind of compelling about the entire idea is that you're essentially enabling people to have access to banking systems that historically like did not have any, right? Like, so, people living in remote areas in like Syria, for example, if they have access to internet, like they potentially have access to not only financial instruments like loans, but like-minded people who want to work with them to build things. So it really is breaking down or it has the potential, I guess, to break down a lot of doors that have been in place that have been kind of historically keeping people down, which in my mind is a really exciting change that could come about because of this.
Absolutely. And I think something you were about to allude to there is it's still pretty inaccessible, like, and foreign to a lot of people. There's, it took, I have a computer science degree, I run a technology company. Like it took me a lot of effort to actually figure out a lot of this stuff and to stay on top of it. It's not necessarily straightforward. It can be a little scary, for sure, because there's a lot of, there's just a lot going on, and there's a lot of owning all this stuff actually possesses a somewhat of a risk too. Like you can, if you're not doing it the right way, you can lose the money you put in. And so I think like the main point as I've been going through this, and obviously like, it's kind of like, Yeti's philosophy on things, but like, this needs to be well designed, especially as it grows up. Right now it's like a lot of the things are, not like the steps to do it are not very well communicated. There's not a lot of like education around it. And so there is a huge amount of opportunity to do really, really good design in Web3, decentralized finance, all this stuff, that's going to make it more accessible to people. So that it really can like, achieve this like, promise, or this like, dream of like, really allowing people to have access to it. And so I think, just from a, where Yeti stands on this, and like, where us as like, broader technologists stand on it, it's, it is really important for us to make sure that this stuff is accessible, and our design can, really educate and guide and explain, some of these things, and make it open and inclusive to everybody. So, all of this said, like, DeFi and crypto carry a lot of risk because you own it. That's like the biggest thing with all of this in in Web3. And this new paradigm. And so none of this is financial advice. NFA, not financial advice. And DYOR, do your own research. And those are two things, like, as you may or may not go off into Web3 land, that you should always keep in the back of your mind. NFA, DYOR. So.
Yeah, be careful. It's a wild world. And still very much growing. I mean, there's still a lot of open questions, but it's super interesting stuff to keep tabs on. And I think it's going to be a big part of the future for sure.